Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing Canada's sex offender registry and a recent decision that found parts of it are unconstitutional. Now, Lawrence, if the Supreme Court has said that this automatic adding of people for life without discretion, that is unconstitutional, but they've given Parliament a year to respond, I mean, they haven't stopped the clock on convictions are still taking place, sex offenses are still taking place, people will be convicted between now and 1 year. What happens to those people?
Yeah, so remarkably, because the Supreme Court suspended this declaration of invalidity, basically what they said is, even though it's invalid, it's going to continue to be effective and it's going to continue to apply until the clock expires on that year or Parliament acts to fix this law. So for now, everything is operating basically as before. I expect Parliament's going to step in and is going to make some changes to this law. Those changes, we don't know what they're going to be, but generally, if I had to guess, I would say they would just focus on making addition to the registry more of a discretionary thing on the part of judges as opposed to something that's automatic. So judges would be able to decide based on an individual's level of risk of reoffending. They would be able to decide should this person be on the registry or not. But if I can leave it with one key takeaway, and I think people are, some people are upset about these changes, and they may not realize that virtually all serious sexual offenders are still going to be put on the registry just as before, and they will be remaining on the registry for decades, if not for life. So it's not as significant as a change, I think, as it's been made out to be.
Matthew, on that question of if the legislature responds and says this is going to be up to the discretion of judges to decide if the person is a high risk of reoffending, what kind of factors go into that decision making?
Well, I mean, I don't think they'll necessarily restrict it to people who are a high risk of reoffending. I think what they're more likely to do, and what follows from the court's reasons, is that they would be given the discretion to exclude people who are an extremely low risk.
Okay.
Of reoffending. And so, you can use various metrics to judge that. And I appreciate that nobody can predict the future with precise accuracy. But you look at the entire context of the person's life, whether they've offended before, the circumstances in which they offended, and the steps they've taken since the offense to rehabilitate themselves. Our justice system, to a much greater degree than that of the United States, is built on the principle that people are generally redeemable. They can rehabilitate themselves. And at some point, you've paid your debt to society and are entitled to move on. It's only those people who are serving life sentences or indeterminate sentences that are stuck in the system for good. So I think that principle of rehabilitation is a positive systemic value that we all need to uphold.
So, Kabir, one of the things to note about this is that this was treated by the court as sort of an additional punishment. But I think a lot of viewers might view that as not a bad thing. Why shouldn't people who have committed a sexual offense or multiple sexual offenses, in the case of a lifetime ad on the registry, why shouldn't that be a part of the punishment? Isn't that an appropriate consequence for having committed a horrible offense?
I think I can understand why the public would have that type of sentiment, but the way sentencing law functions in Canada is that the sentence has to be proportional to the offender and the type of offense. And that's the golden rule when it comes to sentencing individuals in Canada. If putting someone on the sexual offender registry for life is disproportionate to what they've done, then it's not an appropriate sentence to be imposing on an individual. And I think the public might have difficulty understanding that, but that's one of those things that you only really know when you're in that spot yourself. And it's a very fundamental principle of our system.
Lawrence, 30 seconds. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a key principle that we need to uphold. And the reality is, I think everyone recognizes that there comes a point where somebody has paid their debt to society. And what was being done was basically making sure that day never came for some people. So this is a positive step that encourages people to rehabilitate themselves and not see their life as hopeless and that they're going to be, judged for something that this gentleman did when he was 19 years old for the rest of his life.
Lawrence, Kabir, Matthew, thank you all so much for coming on to talk about this complicated issue. We've heard today about the successful challenge to Canada's sex offender registry. The registry serves an important public purpose and is used by law enforcement to investigate cases. But is the registry too inclusive? Would giving judges discretion to determine who should be listed be better? How do we achieve the right balance? You be the judge. Thanks for watching, and remember, a freer Canada starts with you.